So, when did counseling stop being about problem solving? Well, not anymore. Introducing solution-focused counseling with the unlicensed counselor. And now, here's your host, Steve Moak.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of The Unlicensed Counselor. My name is Steve. I am the Unlicensed Counselor. So grateful to be here on a beautiful Thursday afternoon here in sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. And let me tell you, it is beautiful. We made the turn. Smooth sailing, clear, sunny, 80-degree skies ahead. Come on down and visit. And come on down and visit, because if you're watching this on video, you'll see I'm rocking the old school Arizona Diamondbacks jersey. Diamondbacks going to the World Series. We beat our friends in Philadelphia. Didn't think that was going to happen, truthfully, and I'm a fan, but just didn't think that was going to happen. So very exciting time of year. We haven't had the Diamondbacks in the World Series since 2001. And I was fortunate enough to go to games 6 and 7 there and hoping to get to go to a couple games here while we beat up on these Texas Rangers. But I digress. This is not a sports talk podcast, not why you tune in for to listen to me talk. But you know what? It's those little things. It doesn't happen all the time. Make you even more grateful when something like this happens. You know, every 20 years to be able to kind of rally behind a team is kind of fun. So pretty neat to see. But yes, it is beautiful out here. It is just an awesome time of year out here in the desert. Went on a hike yesterday with a 3-year-old, been playing outside, getting on the bike, doing all that fun stuff. Just this is why we live here. So today, going to talk about a topic I know a little bit about, unfortunately, fortunately, depending on how you want to look at it. Relapse, right? So, you know, obviously I'm a person in long-term recovery from drug and alcohol addiction. You know, it's over 9 years now, but I actually started my journey into this world. I really started it in high school, but my first attempt at getting sober started in 1999. And I'll get into this when we start the show really here in a minute and talk about how relapse did end up being a part of my story, but honestly, doesn't have to be. So what I want to do today is really dispel a couple misconceptions around relapse and addiction, and you'll see I'll kind of go through a lot of the talking points that are out there if you're Googling this, because I talk to parents, friends, moms, dads. I was at my daughter's school pickup yesterday, and one of the ladies that works there, we ended up having a conversation around this, and she's got a nephew who moved out here. I mean, I can't go anywhere, and I don't seek these conversations out, but I'm very public about kind of my story of recovery and what that looks like. And inevitably, when I start down this discussion about what I do for work with behavioral health, with the podcast, you know, I start talking about this, and then people always open up about what's going on in their life, and they have questions, and I'll weave that into kind of the relapse discussion as well, too. But here's something that could help you or your loved one not relapse. ShareTech. ShareTech is an at-home drug and alcohol test that requires no observed collection. It is a unique, patented process that actually allows the individual to not have to provide the sample while being observed, right? So that means no eyes on stream. It's really a terrible process, and that's the old dated way of doing things. And the reason that you have to observe a collection is so that people can't cheat. Look, there's substances like urine luck, and that's URINELUCK for all of those that want to dig into it, that are masking agents, things that you can pour into it. There's Wizinators, which are fake prosthetic devices that people will wear that store clean urine. There's flushes, there's detox, there's pills. There's a million things out there to cheat drug and alcohol screens. The ShareTech test identifies those and flags it on a report. Again, this test is performed at a lab and has safeguards to ensure that that test was not cheated or manipulated in any way, shape, or form. Google ShareTech. You can purchase the same drug or alcohol screen that the leading treatment centers and outpatient programs in the country use and recommend as well. Right? Next up, our friends at EasySheets.club. You know I love Easy Sheets. They sponsor. I'm a customer. I'm a fan. Right? Like I always say, it's almost 2024. You've spent $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 on your mattress. Let's make sure that you're sleeping on sheets to match the price tag of that. And while you're at it, let's make sure those sheets are professionally cleaned and pressed, because trust me, there's a difference in pulling that kind of lukewarm bundle that's been wadded up in your dryer versus pulling it out of your sealed mailbox, putting those on your bed and they're nicely pressed and professionally clean. There is a difference. Go to easysheets.club, sign up, starts at $50. We'll ship them out to you once a month. It's a subscription you and whoever's sleeping next to you are really going to enjoy. And last but not least, our youth drug abuse prevention effort. Follow us at Hard Stop Official. Cost you nothing, helps us grow really our movement. It's again, like I've said, maybe the most important work that I'm doing in this youth drug prevention effort with really kind of raw, edgy, bold messaging that we're doing. Follow us at Hard Stop Official. If you want to go to the website, send us a couple bucks. We'd love to do that as well, too. The website is thestopstartshere.org, right? So, as we dive into the show today, behavioral health world. This is something I'm very, very passionate about. When I share, and I share openly, not just on my podcast, not just at my daughter's school pickup, but wherever these conversations kind of come from. And oftentimes they start because people ask, what do you do? I own, businesses in the behavioral health world. I host a podcast called The Unlicensed Counselor. I've co-founded a nonprofit here that really works on youth drug abuse prevention. This is stuff that I spend and dedicate a large portion of my time. And the stories are always different but the same, if that makes sense. I'm struggling, my loved one's struggling, my son, my daughter, my friend, my nephew, my niece, whatever it is, they've gone to treatment and they relapse. They've gone to outpatient, they relapse. They go to AA, they relapse, right? So it's that constant thing of relapse. And first off, in this really weird, dumb world of manipulation of language, you'll hear the term return to use. I don't buy it. I don't buy into it. This is a relapse. You were not using, now you're using, right? I'm not into changing the language around what this is. Let's call it what it is and not soften the language of this. And there's so much of that happening in the addiction treatment world that it warrants an entire episode on its own. But really, a relapse is a person who had made an effort to stop drinking or using drugs and now has started drinking or using drugs again, right? Pretty simple. Wow, shocking. And the first thing that comes up is that relapse is inevitable, right? That's the number one thing that I hear when I'm talking to people, whether they've sent someone to treatment or they're going into treatment themselves or living in a sober living or doing an outpatient program. They're like, well, relapse is a part of recovery. That's a big one that you'll hear people kind of throw around all the time. And it frustrates the hell out of me. Let me be very clear and look directly into the camera for this one. Relapse does not have to be a part of your story, right? And in fact, I hope to God that it is not, because relapse can and often does lead to you no longer being here, aka death, aka funerals. Things are not the same. Things are cut with fentanyl nowadays. This is a real problem, and we need to take it with that level of seriousness as well, too. So I really the first thing I wanted to come out and say is that relapse is not inevitable, and it does not have to be a part of your journey. Many individuals, many people like you and me out there can achieve long-term recovery, right? Well, it takes dedication and effort, and it really does take that every single day, because as soon as you start drifting away, and again, I'm 9 years into my journey here, and actually more, and I'll share a little bit about where I did have a gotcha in my journey as well too. But it doesn't have to be this way. You got to wake up every day and realize and truly believe, and I think this is something that I feel that separates me from maybe the others who keep on that hamster wheel of relapsing and going back and forth. I know exactly what it looks like when a relapse happens. I believe that I am an alcoholic and a drug addict. I know for a fact that I cannot control my drinking or drug use. Does that mean that my brain very often goes, maybe it was just the cocaine that got you, right? Maybe you could, throw back a couple beers, or you're watching that D-backs game or something like that. So, like the sickness of my mind, and call it a disease, call it whatever you want. People get spun out on that. I don't particularly care what you want to call it. It makes no difference to me whatsoever. But the voice in the head of people like me, right, who have this kind of perpetual fascination, really, with drugs or alcohol, I believe and I know for a fact that one, is one is too many and 100's never enough, right? It is just one of those truisms that I believe. And I don't need to go out and test the waters in that. So before I run down the other parts of the misconceptions around relapse, so we can hit on all these, because I do think they're important. I first got sober in 1999. I was 20 years old. I'd been in Boulder, Colorado for 2 years, partying my face off, doing the frat boy dumbass type thing, and just said, okay, I was crashing and burning, reached out to my parents for help when I had found myself just, basically living on the sofa of a fraternity house, and I reached out and said, I need help. And I was on a flight within the next 24 hours and landed at a treatment center here called Valley Hope. It was in Chandler at the time. And I had zero idea, exposure, any concept of not drinking or using or recovery or treatment or any of that stuff. So this was all new to me. And again, I wasn't even of legal age to be drinking. But when I did get a little clarity and a little time and let my brain to heal, I was actually excited about it because I could see kind of the damage and destruction that alcohol had caused in my life. And it had been causing in my life from probably 15 years old, right? So it was just very clear to me at that time. Now, I went about my merry way. I got very involved in AA. I got involved in the church and support groups and helping others and doing all those things. I was doing, quote unquote, all the right things, right, to do and stay in recovery. Now, I went out to a party one night with a girl I was dating at the time. Again, had zero intention about actually wanting to drink as I went out that night. I mean, zero. It wasn't on my radar. Didn't care about it. I would often order a Red Bull when we go out to a party, right? No big deal, just a little something to kind of bump along through the night as everybody's having a good time. I ordered my Red Bull. They gave me what appeared to be a Red Bull in a glass, which is like, okay, whatever, a glass of Red Bull. I wasn't really paying that close attention to it. And took a sip, right? And it was a Red Bull vodka. And no sirens went off, no spotlight hit me, no balloons dropped, confetti, nothing happened, right? I was 23 years old probably at the time, and I was of legal age, and I could have been drinking. But the instant that alcohol hit my lips, I wanted more, right? And again, this was a person who walked into a party, woke up that day, had zero intention at all of saying like, hey, I want to go out and get drunk tonight. And as soon as it hit my lips, what could have just been a minor slip had I had reached out to someone or maybe called my sponsor, been a little more engaged and kind of had more recovery at the forefront. Instead, I chose the path instantly. Well, I don't even think I was thinking. And ordered 8 more drinks, 10 more drinks, ended up getting blackout drunk and woke up in a sorority or dorm room somewhere on ASU's campus, right? I mean, like that, right? And that drink that night, I didn't know it at the time, right? But that set the course for the next 10 years of my life where I thought I could manage, control, get my drinking under control. All of the things that alcoholics and addicts think that they can do around managing and using responsibly or just drinking beer or wine or things or whatever it is. And that single night, that single incident, again, which I truly, genuinely had no intention of doing, took out the next 10 years of my life, a divorce, job, family stress, finance. I mean, just a mess of things before I ended up having to reach out again and calling for help and said, hey, I'm back into that dark place and I need to get help. And that was September 11, 2014, right? And since then, haven't had a drink or drug since. So, I did have a relapse. That one drink took out the next decade of my life. And I tried to control my drinking, my drug use, and inevitably, it didn't all happen overnight, but inevitably, over a period of time, it did all the same exact things that it had done before, and worse, and led me down into a worse place, right? I probably had more money at my disposal at the time and probably chose to use more drugs and harder drugs and right? And really, it was rough. It was extremely rough. So, well, Steve, you're saying, it sounds like relapse was a part of your story. For me, I did have the one, lasted a decade. And you know what that told me and what it proved to me and why it's really not an option for me at all whatsoever, nor is it even of interest to me anymore, is that I know for a fact how I'm wired. I know it and I believe it. I don't need to test the waters. I know that if I take the one sip or the one smoke or the one bump or the one pill or whatever it is, that it's going to take me back there, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually, because that's how I'm wired and that's how I've seen it proven itself out. Doesn't mean that those thoughts don't pop up in my head from time to time, even though, again, I have no interest in it. There's just a certain part of your brain that's back here that's going, well, you know what? Look at that. They got all these hard seltzers and stuff out here. That looks kind of, you're just like, whoa, where'd that come from, right? But it's knowing and then believing who I am, seeing that pattern play out in real time over the course of a decade, and knowing that if I do take a sip, where exactly it's going to lead. So just an interesting little digression on kind of my journey in relapse and what that looked like. But ultimately, I think it's helped me come out stronger and, again, really believe who I am as a person who has a problem with alcohol and drugs, which is why I just can't use them. Now, let's go through some of these misconceptions that you'll hear, because a lot of people come to me, well, I Googled it, I researched it, it says this, and this about it. I'm going, okay, well, look, I worked in a treatment center. I have firsthand experience with this. I saw all the things people would say. I would see people continue to use within a treatment center. They check them out. I work with people in AA. I've taken people to rehabs from detoxes, picked them up, halfway homes. I've lived in this space for quite some time. So one of the things people say is relapse signifies failure, right? Yes, I actually do think it signifies failure, because there was something going on in your life that let you slip back to this point. And relapse rarely just kind of crept up on you that day. Well, Steve, didn't you just say it happened your day? Yeah, but if I probably looked back at that point in time in my story, I had less contact with Alcoholics Anonymous as a program. I wasn't doing actively the things that maybe I was strenuously doing early on in my recovery. I wasn't associating with the same people that maybe I was early on and taking it with that level of seriousness that I was. So even though I wasn't actively drinking, actively seeking out to drink, I wasn't active enough in kind of the things that protected me in my mind from getting back to that place, right? So really, it doesn't have to be viewed as a failure, but there is a slight part of it that, yeah, you screwed up. Now, what I will say is if you can take that relapse right there and stop it at a slip, and I can call it a slip, and then you reach out to your friends, your family, your wife, your sponsor, your support network, your treatment center, your outpatient program, whatever it is, your recovery coach. That's a big thing these days. Use one if you don't like AA or whatever. Let's get it to be a slip, right? So let's tighten that window up so you're not spun out for 10 years like I was, and maybe it's a day or 2 or 3 or whatever it is, and then you go, okay, whoa. I don't want to go back down this road. All right, I screwed up. Failure, not failure. I don't really care what you want to call it, but let's use this as an opportunity to get back. Let's learn from this and grow, right? So take that. Chew on that thoughts as well, too. If we can get a relapse maybe down to a slip instead of full-blown, you're out and running for the next couple weeks, months, and years, right? Let's see if we can just keep it at that. Next misconception I wanted to address is it's a choice, right? A lot of the research will say that it's much more complex. It involves triggers and stress or underlying issues. It's not solely the choice, but a result of various factors. You're making choices every day, not necessarily to relapse, but to be actively engaged in your recovery process or not, right? Who you want to associate with. Do I want to go to that bar and hang out, or maybe should I hit a meeting, or maybe go to the gym or something instead, or maybe I just want to sit at home and isolate and kind of watch old, Scarface movies and kind of trigger things in your brain. So you may not be thinking that you actually actively want to go out and relapse, but you're kind of making these small decisions that kind of separate you in your mind from maybe the healthier place that can keep you from relapsing. Yeah, I'll give the clinical side of this thing that it is more complex and there are triggers and places and things like that. But, little things like if you got to take a different route to work or to the gym or something like that because you go by your old using buddy's house, here's something that I carry forward to me to this day. I don't walk down the alcohol aisle at the grocery store. Just don't do it. Stupid, yeah, probably. But it's worked for me, and I don't see why I need to walk down that. There's nothing in there for me, right? There's nothing in there for me. I choose not to order the baby back ribs with the Jack Daniel's barbecue sauce. Is it because I'm going to get drunk on that? No, not at all. But I just keep these barriers up in my mind and call it stupid, call it silly. I don't care, but I'm sober, and it's working for me. Find what works for you. But it's little stuff like that where it's just like, that's not for me. I'm not interested. Why do I even need to do that, right? Little stuff. Find a different route. Music is a big one. Watch what you're listening to, especially early on. I highly recommend this podcast called The Unlicensed Counselor. It's really going to help you out in this whole thing. I see you laughing over there. Misconception number 3. Once in recovery, cravings disappear. Now, that is a misconception, especially early on. Now, I would think maybe they may start as cravings, and for me and a lot of the people I know, they're not going to persist into long-term recovery, but they may just kind of pop up into your mind randomly is what I found, right? You'll just be out, could be having an awesome day, could be having a crappy day, and all of a sudden something will just pop, a song, a sign, a billboard, a commercial, or nothing at all, and your brain just kind of all of a sudden you're like, why am I thinking about smoking weed right now? Like, what? Like, wouldn't a joint be just kind of nice to take? You're like, what? Where did that come from? Right? But I'm able to pause and recognize and go, see, there it is. Still in there, knocking around somewhere. You're 9+ years away from this thing, and those little things just run through your head. And it probably doesn't help that alcohol advertising is so prevalent. There's dispensaries on every single corner now. If I drive around, I know what Harvest means. That's not some organic kind of store or Curaleaf or whatever the hell there is. I mean, they're everywhere, right? And then you got to smell the damn smell of weed. You go to Vegas or walk around the beach or something. It's like, okay, I get it. Yeah, I get it. It's physically hitting me now. So look, I mean, they're not going to disappear, right? They are not going to disappear. So you do need to learn how to kind of cope or address these things. But again, over time, I wouldn't say that they're cravings. I'll just say that things will pop up from time to time, and you need to be able to let that, it's okay to let that thought come into your head. It's not like you're some robot and you can't let these things enter your mind and I can't. No, you're like sitting there having a good time. And it's like, oh man, that would be nice. And you're like, what? Where did that come from? Right? Recognize it. Go, yeah, okay. That's weird. Funny that that's still going through my head, and go, okay, moving that along because it's not even an option, right? Now, early on, they're probably going to be more like cravings, right? You're still, your brain, your body still healing, recovering. Physically, you're probably still desiring those things. There's not enough time away from that first use, which is why I think, getting heavily involved in whatever type of recovery program or support system is extremely important, because sometimes you're just buying time. Just buying time early. Go to the gym, go for a walk, go for a run. Just don't stay with that thought. Recognize it, address it, think about it, move it along. If you can't get it out of your mind by doing something, doing some push-ups, going to the gym, going for a walk, whatever it is, then call somebody, right? You just can't stay stuck with those things, because that's where trouble can start to brew, right? Next up on the list, misconception-wise, relapse means starting over from scratch, right? I have mixed feelings on this. I'm a competitive guy, right? I'm kind of sports in my background and things like that. So I'm not going to say competitive about my recovery and how long I've been sober for, but it's like, yeah, it's been 9+ years now. Like I'm proud of that, right? It's not easy to do, and it can go away today if I were to let it go away. So if I were to go out and have a drink or a drug today, yeah, I'd be starting over, right? I would be starting over from just a kind of day counter. Well, Steve, isn't it one day at a time? Yeah, but I also like having 9 years as well, too, because that's another barrier between me and my last use where I can just go, yeah, I don't want to go back there and I don't want to start that over. Now, what they're really talking about from starting over from scratch is that, you'll have learned something along the way, right? You'll have learned some skills. Maybe you'll have learned through whatever happened leading up to your relapse, why, how that led you to that point. And you can use that in your defense as hopefully you're able to find and achieve some sobriety again, right? So that you're not starting from scratch and you have those learned experiences and now can make a commitment back to sobriety. I get all that. But I also understand that something wasn't working, right? You missed some things along the way here, and maybe starting from scratch isn't a bad thing, and you can maybe eliminate some of the things that you were doing that candidly weren't serving you very well. So a little bit of mixed feelings on that, but I understand what they're saying. But again, I'd rather we not have to go through that learning process and people really start to believe it and internalize when they hear the word alcoholic and drug addict, however you want to label yourself. I don't particularly care. I choose to do it because it reminds me of exactly who I am and what I don't want to be, right? Because when you start to soften that, or I was a problem drinker, I was just recreational, blah, 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 blah. To me, that just makes it sound like, it's a little too casual, and you could kind of slip back into something, and for me, that's just not an option. Next up on the misconception list, willpower alone can prevent relapse, right? It actually kind of can, and I've seen it. But here's what comes along with willpower can prevent relapse. You're usually just a mean old SOB. Like, you're just not happy. The term white knuckling is what they use to describe it. It means you're just kind of holding on for dear life. I mean, the benefit of being sober needs to outweigh, kind of when you were drinking and things like that. And if you're just an angry old mean bastard, like, that's not really living. You're just kind of white knuckling. You're still an angry SOB, but you're just not drinking now. But I've seen people that can do it, and they insist on trying to do it. And part of being in recovery means healing the other parts of yourself as well too, not just the not drinking, it's just being a better person and kinder and gentler and feeling for others and things like that. Because oftentimes we're very selfish when we're active in our disease. So I see what they're saying, but relapse prevention often requires a comprehensive approach, including therapy, support system, and coping strategies, not just willpower. That's just me reading kind of the dictionary definition of what this is. All of those things are good, and I think that you do need to do this. I just think that you need to be involved in some type of support program that truly understands what it's like to have the addiction of drug and alcohol. I chose to use AA. There's many others out there. If you do want to try and just do the willpower approach, I feel more for your friends and family than I do for you, because they're going to take the brunt of that thing, man. You're just not going to be pleasant to be around, right? Next up, relapse is not a single event. Yeah, this one is true, right? Relapse is a process with that emotional and kind of mental things happening. There's usually warning signs along the way. You're maybe going to places that maybe you didn't go before, maybe running with a group of friends, maybe your eating habits have changed, sleeping habits have changed, you're not hitting the same meetings, you're kind of doing different things than you were initially early on. Maybe, your attitude's changed. There's just signs, right? And they're different for everybody, but anybody who's close to you, and that's why I do think it's important to have kind of a circle around you, is going to be able to recognize kind of a change of what's going on. And those are typically signs that are leading up to this. Look, I just had a friend who I knew got sober at the same time I did, and I was with them the other day, and I was like, something's off. Like, something's off. And I asked him, point blank. I said, what's going on? I said, have you been drinking is actually what I asked. I said, have you been drinking? And they got very irritated and agitated with me and defensive, right? Not good signs, by the way, if you're asking for something. Somebody asked me, Steve, you been drinking? No. I'm happy to take a drug test, alcohol test right now, anytime. No, not an option, not interested. What made you think that? But no, absolutely not. And this is somebody I've known for a long time. And it just, The patterns were off. Speech was a little off. Attire was a little off. Just everything was just a little off. Does that necessarily mean that they have 100% relapse? No. Now, when I asked them about it, and I asked them not like, have you been drinking? Did you relapse? It was like, hey, have you been drinking? You know, like it's not the end of the world, but I mean, and then they get agitated, irritated, you know, kind of defensive about it. Red flag 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 to me. But you're going to see these things. And what I need people to do is take action a little bit sooner when you see these things, right? Because so often, this is what parents do all the time with kids. Like, they want to believe that it's not their kid. They wouldn't do that. Or they're just going through something. Or that teacher sucked. Or no, they're sleeping in. Or they had a test. Or they're tired. Or they make these excuses for the people that they care about and love. And I understand that to a degree. But also, as people who've probably burned a lot of bridges through our addiction, like, you know, we've earned some of the skepticism along the way too. Like, we just have, and you gotta wear that. And again, when I saw this the other day, I'm like, that's a potential sign of something. I can't say for certainty, and I didn't accuse the person, but it certainly kind of led. And I didn't wait till a month later, 2 months later. I asked them point blank, and now I'm going to continue to monitor that situation to see exactly what's going on. So next up, as we get ready to close the show, only those with severe addiction relapse. No, relapse can happen to anyone in recovery. You don't have to be, you know, a homeless guy on the street to be able to do this. You could be, you know, the high-tech finance bro, you know, who's just hitting the bottle a little bit too much, and you can be doing it just as much, and they're the same. I mean, different circumstances, but the same. And everybody thinks that they're different. I had walks of life in the treatment center, from, you know, people who had $0 to big bucks, and everybody had the same type of excuses, and it hit them the same. So this can happen to anybody. I don't care, you know, socioeconomic factors do not determine whether or not you're relapsed, or if you were using crack, or if you were drinking Johnny Walker Blue or whatever. It doesn't matter, right? And I will say this too, another misconception: just because you went to treatment, there is no guarantee that you will not relapse. And in fact, I would argue the exact opposite, right? With treatment success being so abysmal, and that is another topic I want to do on a show for another day. It can be effective, but there are zero guarantees on this. So you need that ongoing support. You have to be vigilant. You've got to put all of these supporting things around and have the prevention plan in place, and the counselors and the therapists and AA, and hold yourself accountable and do all the right things. There are just no guarantees that you are not going to relapse in this thing whatsoever, right? And last but not least, I just want to reiterate that, you know, relapse does not have to be a part of your story. I just hear that from people all the time, and it frustrates the hell out of me, because in my mind, it gives them a green light, right? It gives them an out to say, oh, well, maybe I can just do it once. That once thing anymore is really a deadly thing. I got out of the game just before kind of fentanyl hit the scene, and I am grateful as all hell that I did, because I don't know if I'd be here with my daughter in the other room and getting to live life and experience all the joy that I get to have now. You know, it doesn't have to be, and take it with the level of seriousness that, you know, that one relapse could be your last one. And every single time I see someone relapse who comes back into the rooms, they're worse for wear, man. They look like they got run over by a truck. It just progressively gets worse. And let's not mention the fact that just living in that cycle of constant relapse, of treatment to relapse to halfway house to sober to not sober, it's just exhausting. Like, it's exhausting. And I heard a statistic the other day that it takes a person on average who's in long-term, who's in recovery, 15 years to get back to the place of a quote-unquote normal person and where they're at in their life, just from whether that's financial setbacks or divorce or job or maturity, emotional, whatever that is. Like, and imagine just doing that ongoing for years or decades, and just the toll that it takes on you. Now, when you get some time, think about the toll that it takes on your family as well, too. And if you can start to recognize kind of the emotional toll and what you're doing to the loved ones in your lives, hopefully that's going to start to give you a little perspective, and at least maybe another reason not to continue down this vicious cycle. So, look, ran a little bit long today, but it's just one of these topics I'm very passionate about. It comes up all the stinking time when I'm talking to people about addiction, about behavioral health, and just how often people relapse. And I'm here to say it doesn't have to be that way. Be on the lookout for a lot of these things that I've talked about today, and a lot of these misconceptions as well. And hopefully you can be able to help someone avoid the relapses in their life. And if you don't, if you have questions, shoot me a note, send me a DM. Happy to continue talking about this online as well, too. But that is all we have for today. Again, my name is Steve Moak. I am the Unlicensed Counselor. Until next time, thank you very much.